Going live. We
Hello, everyone. I believe we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn for the launch of Mob United's new podcast. It's called The New Talk for Moms of Black Boys. We're going to get into why that is later. But first, I just want to welcome people in. Take your time, pull up a chair, grab some tea and a snack because we're going to just have a conversation tonight. And we're so excited to be launching this podcast on Giving Tuesday. I'm Depelsha McGruder, the founder of Mob United, and I am so excited, so very excited to be in conversation with our newly named and first ever full-time paid executive director, Kimberley Robinson Alexander. And you're going to get to know Kimberley tonight. You want to say hello to the people, Kim?
Sure. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Yes. So tonight I want you to just get to know Kim a little better. If you've been following Mob United for the past 7 years, you already know her. You've seen her. She's been involved with the organization from the very beginning, but she's stepping into this big new role, and we could not be more excited because we know the organization is in very capable hands. So I think, Kim, I want to start by going back to the beginning, all the way back to the beginning, where we started and where we first met. So we started in the summer of 2016. And, I just remember thinking it's summer, it's July. I just want to hang out, go to the beach, be with my kids. I have two sons, obviously. They were 7 and 4. And I remember I love the summer. It's my favorite season. So I just think of the summer as carefree and fun and beach and pool and kind of a break from like the grind of the school year. And I remember wanting to be in that space and being at home with my family in Atlanta, and then going to the airport to return to New York where we live, and being in the airport, looking up at the screen at CNN and seeing images of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, on the ground with blood coming out of his stomach. He had been shot by police, and they were just playing it over and over and over in the airport. And that's what we were watching as we were going home. And it was very disturbing, obviously. And I went to bed that night with those images in my head, then woke up the next morning, turned on CNN, a bit of a news junkie, and saw another family on the air from Minnesota and thought, they were talking about, it seemed like a similar topic. And I was like, oh, well, this must be Alton Sterling's relatives in Minnesota reacting to his killing. That's literally what I thought. And when I figured out it was actually another killing of a Black man by police that had happened in less than 24 hours in a whole different state, just as gruesome, Philando Castile in Minnesota, and that he had been shot and killed with his girlfriend and her 4-year-old daughter in the back seat as they watched. And by all accounts, he had complied with police, took out his ID, showed that he was a legal gun carrier, all of that, and still ended up dead. And it was just crushing. And I know, because of where we are today, that I was not the only one who felt that way. Many people felt that way. And, I started a private Facebook group. I love how you told the story. I heard you in an interview, Kim, saying that I didn't know how to use Facebook.
That I didn't know. Nicer than that.
I was not offended at all, because the truth is I didn't know what I was doing, and I was not intentionally trying to start anything. So it speaks to like this experience and the power of God, honestly, and divine purpose, because I don't think either of us are the type of people who would have met people on the internet to start anything. Like I say all the time, I'm an introvert. We're both of the no new friends mantra. Like I don't mess with strangers like that. So there's no way that I would have ever devised a plan to start a Facebook group and then meet the people on Facebook from all around the country who I do not know and start an organization with them. That's not something I would ever choose to do. but that's what happened. So 7 years ago, here we were online in a Facebook group. And I'll tell the story for anyone who hasn't heard it. There may be some people hearing this story for the first time since we're on different platforms, but I started a private Facebook group for moms of Black boys just to express what I was feeling in that moment, the anger, the rage, the confusion, the sadness, the paralyzation. I literally could not get out of bed. And I sent it to 30 people who I knew personally, who I knew were moms of Black sons, who I thought would want to have, a space and a conversation around like how we were feeling and how we're going to keep our sons safe in this world. And as Kim said, I didn't know how Facebook groups worked. I thought it was a private group. I didn't know people could add other people or join on their own. And it just took off virally from there. People started joining the group, adding their friends. It grew very quickly to 500 people within 5 minutes, 1,000 within an hour, on and on and on. I've written about this a lot, and it grew to 21,000 people that very day within 12 hours. And then very shortly after that, within a few months, 170,000, which is where we're at today. And one of the people who answered the call that I didn't know I was making was Kim. So maybe you can start by just telling us how you ended up in what was initially just a Facebook group.
Mm-hmm. So, I have, again, you and I do share that whole no new friends, and I am still friends with my very first friend, like truly the first person in life that I've known since the crib and diapers. And she doesn't do Facebook a lot. And so I would say when you make the comment of divine intervention, you're absolutely right, because I was the only person she invited to the group, but she did invite me to the group, and her name is Autumn. And she put me in this group, and at the time I wasn't in a whole lot of groups, and I was like, oh well, this is interesting. And then I started seeing the conversation, and then I saw Nashiva Star, one of our first people who were involved in health and wellness, started posting some things just like a few days in. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. And yeah, I can do that. Then it was like, well, we're going to have a call. And I was like, okay, well, I'll be on the call,
Right.
so it happened really, really quickly. But very honestly, the way that it happened and how it presented, I thought it was an established group then, an established organization then. I didn't realize in that moment that we were actually creating the foundation.
Right.
I just thought I was coming along to add to it.
Wow. And that's the reaction a lot of people had. So just to fill in a few blanks. So Kim mentioned this was a Thursday when this was in the news. Let's shout out like some of the people who were in the beginning. So Chris Baldwin,
Mm-hmm.
person in North Carolina who I did not know, posted in this group that I started, we should have a call. We should plan a march, something like that. And so it's like, okay, well, I started this group, so I guess I have to show up for this 7 a.m. Saturday call that she's suggesting, right? So we have a 7 a.m. Saturday call. 2 days later, there are moms on the call from around the country. And we're like, what are we going to do? Like, we don't want our sons to just be a hashtag. We don't want to be idle. And I'm getting emotional thinking about it. But what happened was, I said, I'm not really a big marcher. Not that I don't believe that marching is important or effective. It certainly worked a lot in the civil rights movement, especially in a pre-digital era when you couldn't go on social media and gather a lot of people. It was a way to demonstrate presence, and still is, but it's not like my way. And I was like, I don't want to plan a march. I think there have been marches, but after the march, then what? I want to plan a long-term strategy to address these issues. And so we went away, Tammy Greer Brown, who's still involved, was taking notes. She was taking the minutes. And the next week I came back with kind of the like mantra that we still use today, a draft of a mission statement that we continue to workshop. And then the 5 pillars of MOBB United as what this long-term approach is going to be. And it was and is change perception, influence policy, demonstrate our power, politically and economically, partner strategically, and promote self-care. So that was kind of the blueprint. And then we built from there on actually structuring the organization. Should we be a 501c3 or 501c4? Should we be a B Corp? Should we even be nonprofit, or should we be for-profit? And L3, there are all these structures that we evaluated. And we were all together. Like from that point forward, we just were a part of each other's lives constantly. We were all mostly working full-time jobs, but doing this at night, on the weekends, late nights, midnight, 1 a.m., we were in touch. And then we started having weekly calls to plan and strategize. I want you to share like some of your early experiences in MOBB United, like those first few months?
First few months were, it was like whirlwind. It happened so quickly, and I can just remember almost every day of the week being on a call with somebody, right? Just talking to one person or another person, and health and wellness, marches and demonstration, policy, what we were going to do, and formulating all of these ideas and what was happening. And for health and wellness back then, there were kind of all of these subcommittees. We had, I don't know, we had like 8 or 9 committees. We now have 6, but back then we had so many of them. And I was like, well, special needs. I have a bunch of special needs kids, and we had someone who was in charge of health and wellness. Shout out to Asha in Georgia.
Yeah, Asha.
That's right.
Yes.
Asha and Nashiva Star, who were co-chairs of the Health and Wellness Committee. And I was like, okay, well, this is where I feel like I fit in. And it was like, all right, well, go for it. And like, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to write my proposal. Unbeknownst to me, nobody was writing proposals back then, but I was just like, this is what's going to be. I'm going to write a bunch of, my proposal, and then realize who you were. And I was like, oh, she's in Brooklyn. I didn't know you were from Georgia then, but I knew you were in
Mhm.
Brooklyn. And I was on my way up to see my mom. My mom's birthday is August 31st. And so I reached out to you, and I'll let you tell the rest.
Oh, yes. So she reached out to me to set up lunch. I was like, oh, this is nice. I'm meeting one of these people I've been working with on Facebook. We'll have lunch. I was working at Viacom at BET at the time, and I went to like one of the places near my job. And I was like, I'll meet this person. It'll be cool. And I was not expecting what I got, which was a very formal, put together proposal. I thought we would just have some French fries, get to know each other. But Kim came in with a printed proposal of how she wanted to approach this work, particularly in the special needs and health and wellness and self-care areas. And I was just really impressed. I mean, I think the thing that still shocks me to this day, like, just think about it. Like, think about what a crazy place the internet is and
Mm.
how random it is in terms of filtering people, and like the fact that we very quickly attracted such high quality, highly talented, highly competent, agreeable, um, passionate women who wanted to help build this is still to this day just mind blowing to me. That it tells you like it was meant to be, because it usually goes down. And the fact that we're still together 7 years later, one, as a nonprofit, many nonprofits don't make it 7 years. I heard the average is maybe 3 to 5 for new nonprofits. Two, that we started virtually. We didn't even start, like most nonprofits start in a specific location with specific people who know each other and then build from there. We started nationally, virtually, and then had to go in reverse to go locally in community. And we'll talk about our chapter formation later. But it was just like shocking to me that you came to me and you were so clear and passionate about your purpose and what you could bring to the table. And I was just so moved, and I continue to be so moved. So thank you. Um, and I don't remember the exact timing of this, but shortly after that, you had another experience. So we came together around the deaths of Alton Sterling and Philando Castile, which, there were many who came before them. Think about Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Tamir Rice, John Crawford, Trayvon Martin, which was not an officer, but someone pretending to be. Just so many cases. So this is not nearly the beginning of this story, but then shortly after we started, there was another killing. And I would love for you to talk about your experience with Terrence Crutcher's family.
So with Terrence Crutcher, again, we were kind of in this situation where what do? We want to mobilize. And so Terrence
Maybe
Crutcher
just remind people of that case, because there have been so
was
many.
killed in Tulsa, Oklahoma by Officer Shelby. And he was on a not really a deserted road, but a quiet road. And was asked to come out of his car and move away from it, and then went back and reached into his window. And at the time that he reached into his window, Officer Shelby shot and killed him, and then didn't get him help. So initially he was shot, he wasn't immediately dead, and then didn't get help, and then the handcuffing and all the rest of that. But subsequent to his injuries, he did die. And it was kind of like, okay, so what do we do? And outside of why we had come together, this was like the first killing that happened after that.
Mm.
And so it was myself, Manera Smalls, um,
Peggy, right?
Runs,
Mhm.
Sandra. Oh, I don't remember Sandra's last name, but she is in San
San
Antonio.
Antonio. Mhm.
Yes. And myself, and like, talk about no new friends. I let these strangers spend the night in my house, right? Like, they came, we all kind of got together between Dallas, Houston, Texas, San Antonio, Texas, and then we drove to Tulsa, stayed in hotel rooms with each other. We had never met each other before, but we went, we represented Mob United, but more importantly, we had an opportunity to really meet the parents of Terrence Crutcher, attend his church, meet his wife and his children, and collectively support the family in that moment when everything was unraveling. And so it was really, it was a moving experience, and they were so accepting of people who just wanted to be present to help hold them up.
Mm. I know that was so powerful. And it kind of became, I mean, we were making this up as we went, right? Like we had the 5 pillars, but we didn't know like how we would actually execute, but it kind of became a part of our approach. Obviously we want to push for policy change and advocate for justice and accountability when someone is killed, but there are a lot of organizations doing that. The Black Lives Matter movement was well underway. There's the ACLU, there's an NAACP. A lot of people push for policy change, and we thought it was important that we approach this as mothers. So
Mhm.
although we're pushing for the same type of changes in society in terms of policy and changing perceptions of Black males in particular, we thought when we show up, we need to show up as mothers. So instead
Yeah.
of showing up and going to, with a bullhorn to yell outside, we want to be the people who show up and say, what do you need? Like, we understand what you're going through because this is our worst nightmare. Like, I think that's why we were called to it. Like, none of us want this to happen to our sons. That's why we do this, right? So when we see it happen to someone else, we want to know, like, how can we comfort you in that moment? And it became a part of like how we roll out our plans. So yeah, we're advocating for policy. Yes, we're writing op-eds and trying to get in the media to talk about this. Yes, we're thinking about our own health and wellness and how we deal with all these images assaulting us constantly of people being harmed. But we also, as moms, want to show up and
Mhm.
be that network of support, and also just think about what the family needs in that moment. So I would say that's kind of a unique thing that we bring to the table.
I think that there's nothing greater than the hope that lives in a mother who births a child. And so that is right. Like, you put all your hope, your joy, all of that stuff, and to have a parent, a mother bury their son, it changes how you view the world. And we see
Mm,
that as we stay in contact with so many of the moms who have unfortunately lost their children, their shift in how they approach the world, and their hope is there's not another, instead of hoping for the best for their own.
mm, yes. So, very heavy to remember that and relive it. So, I want to shift gears so that I can stop crying to talking about you. So, I think it's important as you take on this big new role as executive director of Mob United, Moms Black Boys United, and Mob United for Social Change. And I don't know if we clearly explained that we are structurally and legally 2 nonprofit organizations. We have the 501c3, which is Moms of Black Boys United, and that's the side that focuses on information and support and hosting webinars and seminars and changing perceptions, image campaigns. And then we have the 501c4, which is Mob United for Social Change, which is pushing for legislative policy change at the local, state, and federal level. And also, it's the arm we use to speak out on current cases and to advocate for justice in particular cases. So with that said, Kim, I would love to hear. Well, one thing you didn't share is what attracted you to the group. So you talked about your friend inviting you, but what was going on in your life at the time that made this such a compelling thing for you to do?
So I have 4 children and 2 grandchildren. I have 2 girls, 2 boys, and my sons are 25 and 17. Well, 7 years ago, my youngest child and my youngest son was 1 month shy of his 10th birthday. And he has a condition called EOE, eosinophilic esophagitis, and he was going through a period of time at that time that he could not eat food. He is essentially has an internal allergic reaction to proteins in food, and the only option we had at that point because of severe malnutrition was to put in a feeding tube. So this was a surgically implanted tube in his stomach to give him nutrition, but it meant he wasn't going to be able to eat anything with his mouth. And he had just learned that at a recent doctor's appointment. And he was kind of mourning. He was beginning that mourning process of what was happening. And ironically enough, he was obsessed with like the Food Network shows, and he watched them. We contacted
Mm.
celebrities from the Food Network that would call him. It was like really cool. And there was a program on back then that you would guess different things. And so um, I left for work at that time before he went to school. And so he left the house after me, and he had a Ziploc bag, a regular old sandwich bag, and it had a bunch of oregano in it. And he goes to school and he's with his friends, and he opens the Ziploc bag and he's asking his peers to guess what it is. And a teacher saw him and took him to the principal's office. Principal is this big white guy, older gentleman, and the principal calls the police.
Mm.
So 3 state troopers show up, couple police dogs, like the narcotic dogs show up,
And
and
let's keep in mind he's 9 years old and
he's
he's 47 pounds.
he's 47 pounds and he's about 3'9" or so at this point. And they locked him in the principal's office, and they threatened him with arrest. They told him, I did not even know what the age of arrest in Texas was then, but they told him, they said, if you were 1 month older, you would be going to jail right now. My son was completely and totally traumatized, and I went to school boards and contacted the district's attorney in terms of just trying to figure out what the legalities were, because I didn't know for 72 hours. He was
Mhm.
so scared that he was in trouble that he didn't even report it to me. And
Mm.
so he lived with this trauma. He's going to school the next day. Now he has this stigma. He has this pending surgery happening, and he's scared, and I don't know it.
And they
Uh,
just assumed it was weed. We should just
oh yes, they
right.
just
But
assumed it
which
was.
I don't understand if they have police dogs. Like you can figure that out pretty quickly.
And the principals, I said, you knew it wasn't marijuana. And the principal was like, well, I didn't know that. And it was asinine. It was really,
Mhm.
really asinine. And the part of the story that I don't think I've ever really shared is I come from a traditional Hispanic household, and we gathered around the table. That was really, really traditional for us. We cooked together, we spent holidays, we ate, and we ate well. And so that is how, when my children were growing up, we did. We made homemade pizza, we went apple picking, we did all of these things that centered around the table. Um, and then I had a child I couldn't feed.
Mm.
And so for me, having a child who at one I found out was allergic to my breast milk, and everything after that, I
Mm.
too had a mourning period. I had a mourning period of knowing food was hurting him, but
Mhm.
also knowing that everything that was core to me and how I displayed love in my home was different for him. And how did I continue to honor my 3 older children and then figure out a way to honor him? And so everything for me was dismantling when the group was started.
Mm. Wow. That's every time you tell that story, I can't believe it. It's just unbelievable. So tell us, Now let's go further back. Tell us about Kim growing up and kind of your personal journey from childhood through adulthood, whatever you're comfortable sharing about, you know, where you're from, what your life was like, and kind of the personal and professional journey you've been on that led you to this point.
I've shared that, I think that everything that I've dealt with growing up and in life has really prepared me for now. Personally, it prepared me for the journey of kind of being my authentic self and finding my authentic self. I am an introvert. And so public speaking wasn't me. Being out in the forefront wasn't me. I would go to like parties and find my way to a kitchen because that was the place I was comfortable. So that I didn't have to be in a room with a bunch of people. Um, Growing up, I spent a long time in an angry place.
Mm.
Um, I almost today don't recognize that person then. And so, I dealt with a healthy amount of abuse in my life. My first pregnancy, I was 13 years old. I was coming out of the last time I had experienced abuse and got pregnant when I was 13. You didn't have that child and really started to spiral. I was
Mm.
spiraling out of control. Doing what I felt like doing. I was smoking marijuana, doing a whole lot of stuff that I didn't have any business doing. Um, got pregnant again at 15. And the day that I found out I was pregnant was the day that my mother was putting her out of control teenager on a plane to Costa Rica to live with my father.
Mm.
And so I remember telling my mother by fax. I was in Costa Rica. I went to my father's office and I wrote on a piece of paper, "I'm pregnant. I'm sorry." And I faxed it to her. And I
Oh
didn't
wow.
think about the fact that I was faxing this to her office. Like I faxed this to her.
Oh, oh no. Oh no.
Had like
No.
it completely didn't compute for me that
That's
I
not
was
fun. It's
faxing.
funny now, but
Oh yeah, hindsight is funny. But like I don't even remember if I put my name on it. I don't know if she ever even got it, right? But
mm.
that was my way of telling her. And I remember my father's secretary in his office. I told him, I said, I need to go to the doctor. And he didn't ask me why. I just said, I need money to go to the doctor. And his secretary was going to go with me. And she did. And I had confided in her and said, I'm pregnant. I can't tell my father, but I really do want to make sure that I'm okay. And
Mm.
so she took me to a clinic and I got checked out and all of that stuff. The third appointment, I'm going monthly. And so the third appointment, my father finally says, "You're going to the doctor a lot. I want to know um, what's going on. So when you get to the doctor, call me."
Mm.
So I went to the doctor and I didn't call him. And so when um when I came back, I kind of just sat in the office and the office was closed and it was just he and I. And he said, "Why didn't you call me?" And I said, "Well, I have something to tell you." And he said, "What?" And I said, "I'm pregnant." And I remember that being the first time I ever saw my father cry.
Mm.
And he asked me by who. And I said, "I'm not telling you." And his crying then went to anger. And I remember my father putting me out my house for 24 hours in Costa Rica. I didn't know anybody.
Oh
But we
wow.
knew him. And and by put me out the house, what I mean is he took my keys. So I was sleeping in my bed. He took my keys and he was just like, "You're gonna do whatever." And it was one of the moments in which I really began to appreciate being in the United States
Mm.
because um there was not a whole lot that somebody who was 15 and pregnant could do in Costa Rica, you know. And as I began to learn the different systems and began to learn what it was that I could and couldn't do,
Hmm.
I understood that there was much more opportunity for me in New York specifically. I grew up in New York.
Okay.
And so,
So did you leave and go back? Did you talk to your mother and
well, no, I wanted to have my child in the States. That was the first thing. The second thing was in Costa Rica, you can't go to school and be pregnant. Like there was nothing that
oh,
I
okay.
could
Hmm.
successfully do. So I came back to the United States. I came back to my mom's house and went to a pregnant and parenting teen school for a little while. I was 6 months pregnant when I returned. At 7 months pregnant, my child's father was murdered. And so I was 16. I was having this baby, and I found out that he had been killed subsequent to an argument in Harlem. And then I instantly became a teen mother without a father.
Wow. Well, that's like a whole show into itself. But how did you tell us how those early experiences shaped you? Like
Mhm.
how did you go from there to here? Because
A
people
lot of
need to
work.
hear that.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. I spent a long time in therapy. Um, and then I spent a long time taking control of my life. And initially it was an unhealthy level of control. It was
Mm,
controlling who had permission to be in my space, my person. I now have a daughter. Um, but I kept working that, and I kept working that and kept working that. And I think the other piece of it is that it really was a lot of realizing that everything that I needed existed in me
mm,
for me to get to this point. And resiliency was innate in me, and power was innate in me, and leadership was innate in me, even in those moments that I wasn't trying to be that.
mm,
Even in those moments where I felt my weakest, I was still dependent upon. And, over the 7 years, and now I'm getting emotional because I see people like Sonia and you and Nicole who are Otisa, Patty making comments as we are having this conversation. But you guys are really integral in helping me see me. When I started this 7 years ago, I wasn't impressed by the plan I gave you. I wasn't impressed at all. I just had an idea. Uh,
mm,
but all of you have helped to give me a platform to really hone in and find my place. Um, Everything that I've done with Mob United has been the ideas that lived inside of me for a very, very long time. I published my first book of poetry when I was 15, and words have always been the thing that I've used to express all of those things. So being able to host webinars and have conversations and talk about those things, that platform didn't exist for me.
mm,
You know, I stopped writing. I remember writing a poem when I was probably 18 or so. And I said, I'm not going to write anymore in that poem. And I stopped writing because I didn't have an outlet for the pain. And so when I found an outlet, what else was there for me to do with that outlet but keep showing up? Even when I was mad at y'all, I was like, all right, whatever. And so that has really, really been what Mob United has been for me. It has
mm,
been a space that all of it, abuse and the crack epidemic, and having, addicted people in my family, and all of it, it really has been the space where I have been able to wrap my arms around all of that pain and growth and work and
Mm.
all of it, and push it out of me.
Wow. That's beautiful.
That's what brought me here.
Wow. Tell me, I have so many questions, but we don't have unlimited time. So I'm trying to tell me how a few things, how your early life experiences, what it taught you about navigating systems and how it informs your work today. And also, you should share your professional life because we've heard your personal journey, which is very powerful and compelling. But I think for me, one of the things that made you, in my mind, the ideal person for this job is the combination of your personal journey plus your professional expertise.
Mhm.
So maybe if you can share how those things connect and like what you've learned along the way that informs how you're approaching this work.
So initially I did a lot of kind of human services work, and was working in human resources for a juvenile detention facility back in 2009, in Pennsylvania. And it was probably maybe my third or fourth real like professional job at that point. I had all four of the children by then, and the job I was working was going regional, and I couldn't do that. I wasn't in a position where regional was going to work. I had, a bunch of sick kids, and so I had to decide what I was going to do. And I had an opportunity to take a severance package and get unemployment. And I was able to go to school without having to work. And then I had to sit back and kind of decide what I wanted to do. And so I went to nursing school, and I became a nurse in 2010. And up until June, that was kind of like my life's work. It was the thing that I was going to do for the duration, take care of people, take care of, elderly children, sick people, be present in that way and in that capacity, and take care of whole bodies. That was kind of like my thing, not just the physical body, but the whole being of a person. And that's kind of what led me also to like the special needs when we first started this out, because at the
Mhm.
time I was working with special needs children. I had my own special needs children. Um, and and so I did that for 13 years in a lot of different ways. During the pandemic, I moved from bedside nursing to administration. And it's crazy because I vision board, and I vision boarded, every year. And in my head, I was going to open up a facility. It was going to be a full service facility for adolescent medicine patients, right? You're going to get therapy. You're going to be able to see a doctor. You're going to get condoms. You're going to get everything you need, because the adolescent medicine clinic at St. Luke's Hospital is a huge part of my life and what helped save me. And so I wanted to recreate this structure where it was like one-stop shopping with real people who cared.
Mm.
That kind of evolved, and I was like, okay, and then I want to do an assisted living center, and I'm vision boarding all of this stuff, right? But it's all centered around nursing, and it's centered around that, having a facility, and it's going to run itself. I'm gonna make a lot of money. I'm gonna sit home, and I'm gonna keep volunteering for MOBB United. That was what I was going to do.
Mhm.
And I found myself having 5 jobs in 12 months.
Mm.
I had all of these jobs, all but one was on purpose. Like I needed to learn all of these kind of key things in order to bring my vision board to fruition. And
Mhm.
so I would be somewhere for 3 months. I was moving, I was doing this, I was acting like a millennial, and job hopping and all of that stuff. And so the last place I was at was an assisted living center, and I came to Atlanta for our retreat. And I was already a disgruntled employee. I didn't like the feeling of treating people poorly for the bottom dollar. I hated for profit organizations that were kind of just putting these rooms places and bringing people in, taking their money. And I'm talking about like $2 million buy-ins and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So retreat came, and at that point, I had already decided it was time for me to jump ship and find another job, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I started looking again at whether or not I was ready to open up a facility. And got to the retreat. We did the retreat. We visited with you, and I was talking to Delicia, and I said, I think I'm resigning from my job, like when I get back. And she was like, okay, so do you have a job? I was like, no, I have a job. I don't know what I'm gonna do. So what's the plan? I don't have a plan. I just know I don't want to do this anymore. And I landed back in Houston on a Monday, went from the airport to my job, walked in, and my manager said something. I don't even remember what it was. What I remember is walking into my office, shutting my office door, and typing my resignation and emailing it. I still had no plan. I had no job. Um, just kind of like, I'm done. And I did. And so that was kind of like the full circle moment where I realized that my plan was not the plan. It
Mm.
wasn't.
Wow.
And I had hurt. I had learned to deal with my hurt. I had learned to grow. I had learned to lead. I had learned to be diplomatic. I had learned what it looked like for people to be in their at their worst. I had ushered people to, through their transition. I had done all of these things um, for so long. And at the end of it all, I felt so unfulfilled. Um, and then the vision changed.
So let's talk about that pivot. How did it change, and what led to you saying that you wanted to do this? Because as you know, people had approached you and said you should do it before, and you didn't. So tell me like what shifted for you, and then I want to talk about just some of your work in Mob United because people may not know like all the things you've done.
Mhm. Um, what shifted my thinking, um, which didn't happen until we really had all of the outline for an executive director, right? That's when it happened. That's when I was like, oh, well, maybe I can do this, because I didn't think I could. I didn't think I could fundraise. I didn't think, like, there were so many parts of the job where I was like, I don't know if I can do that. Um, and then I feel so accountable. Like, I want us to succeed. And I didn't want to be the reason why we didn't. And I wanted to make sure that Mob United was in capable hands. But the more we kind of rolled out what capable looked like, I began to believe that it was something that I could do. Um, and then I remember Beth pulling how much time I
Hmm.
spent
Mm-hmm.
working on Mob United. And I was second to her. Like, she's retired.
So Beth is in the background. She leads tech for Mob United.
Mhm, and does a phenomenal job.
Yes. And
Um,
so she pulled like time spent by volunteer.
mhm.
And Kim saw that she was already working here full time. Basically.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely, right. Um, and so it was kind of like, it's the place I feel home. I feel like I'm at home here, and I believe in the work, I believe in the mission and purpose, and I for sure believe that my children and my sons especially have the right and should have the opportunity to be exactly who they are. I've watched their pain. because of where we live and how this world views them. And I at this point I couldn't imagine being someplace else.
And we can't either. We're very pleased you made that decision. So I just, for a few minutes, want to highlight like what you've been up to for the past 7 years. There's so many things, we can't cover all of it, but you mentioned initially starting out with kind of being the leader for moms with special needs
Mm.
children. You've built a mental health toolkit. You've worked on self-care initiatives. You built created something I'd never seen before, which is an autism awareness and acceptance talent showcase. You've hosted webinars, you've launched our internship program. So what would you like to highlight about your time with Mob United? What are you most proud of when you look back over the past 7 years?
Um, that we got through the storm. I think what I'm most proud of is less about what was created and the fact that we still do it together. There's this narrative that says Black women and women in general don't know how to do things together. And we've done that together, even through disagreement and, you know, discord is probably not the right word, but we haven't always agreed, but we've always kept our eye on the prize. I'm most proud of the fact that we can look back and really say that we've made a difference. Um, Even if it's in the individual lives, I think we've shown up, being able to just sit in with a mom who is going into an IEP meeting or a 504 meeting for school, or talking someone through a school board presentation. I think coming out of my shell, really identifying the space and place that I belong, and all of the programming that we've done. you know Special needs, I would always say, is not just those who have a perceived deficit, but it is the gifted, it is those who are not seen in their authenticity, um, that is them. And so we have managed to highlight so many people and so many things that other people have not thought about, and we've been able to do it in love and give people a platform. And I found my voice. I think I found my voice and the purpose in everything that I've experienced in life.
Wow. Okay. So as we look ahead, we have about 10 minutes left. So I want to make sure we give space for what's coming up. So one thing that's coming up is this is the launch of our new podcast. The
Mhm.
title is The New Talk for Moms of Black Boys. So I just want to share like why we landed on that title. So everyone, if you're a parent of Black children, you've heard about the talk. Like everybody talks, you have to have the talk with your children. And the talk is sitting them down and telling them how they should conduct themselves in public, and especially when interacting with law enforcement and figures of authority, how they have to be compliant and respectful and all these things. And you drill into them fear of what will happen to them if they don't. And so that has always bothered me, this talk. Yes, we'll have the talk, but I think it's the wrong talk, or it's certainly an incomplete talk. So I've always said on this journey, like the talk we need to be having is with the people who are in positions of authority, who are supposed to be fully developed adults and trained to do their jobs, on how we want them to interact with our children, to see them as fully human, to treat them with respect, to not assume their guilt when they've done nothing wrong, to not assume if they're holding a cell phone that it's a gun or whatever. There's case after case. And so we're trying to shift the talk. We want to have a new talk. We're not going to keep having that same talk. Everybody already knows you have to talk to your kids about how to interact with the police. We got that. But what other talks are we having that's really going to shift the experience for Black boys and men in this country, in terms of not always being perceived as fitting the description and being a threat or an aggressor of someone who will do you harm. So that's one thing. What are you most excited about, Kim? And maybe tell people like what kind of things they can expect to hear on the podcast going forward.
I think we're going back to basics on the podcast. So we've shared over the 7 years lots of different things, but at our core, we are a single mission organization, and that mission is to save our sons, right? And so there's a lot of different avenues and facets of that and how we do that, but ultimately that's the goal. And so back to basics for us kind of just means we're going to go back to know your rights conversations, where you can go, how, where your outlets are, that mental health conversation. We want to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. And so we want to go back to that, the core of us, and have those kinds of conversations. And then all of the traditional stuff that we do, our mental health programming, our Autism Awareness Month programming. We have a huge voting year coming up. And
Mm-hmm.
so we're launching the Level Up series. The Level Up series is really learning what voting looks like. I think many of us, especially as Black people, are disenfranchised from the voting process, feeling like our vote doesn't matter. And so want to learn what that process looks like, define terms, and then re empower people to go out there and be heard. Um, we're going to we know that our Protect Them campaign has historically been, our huge image campaign. But we want to launch as a subsidiary to that the Grace campaign. And the Grace campaign is really centered around all of our sons, every last one of them, even the one that makes a mistake, even the one that is actually wrong, deserves to get the benefit of the doubt, deserves to get due process, deserves to be protected. Um, and we know that that's not always the case. We don't have to be the perfect person to be the protected person. We want our kiddos to know that it's okay for them to experience ages and stages and have issues and still be protected and seen for their authentic self. And I continue to use the word authentic because I think that's what it is. We in 2023 deserve to be authentic. We need in our hair, in our dress, in our speak, in how we present ourselves. We should not have to code switch to be heard, to be present. And so all of those things are the kinds of things that we're going to talk about and demonstrate on our podcasts.
Wonderful. And you make a key point. So I think we have been to date very careful and conservative in our approach in terms of how we use our voice.
Mhm.
And it was intentional because I think a big part of the point we were trying to make is like not all of our sons are doing bad things and criminals and in gangs. So we really went hard to defend people who were clearly not doing anything wrong. Like you cannot argue with this. He didn't have a gun. He was going to school. He was a straight A student. I think we skew more toward that. For good reason. But you're right. All we want the message to be that all sons are worthy of love and protection and, like you said, due process, justice, grace, just as our non-Black counterparts have grace on making mistakes as young people. Our children deserve that too.
Mhm.
So I look forward to seeing how that rolls out. And I would love for you to just tell people how they can get involved and support us. We haven't really talked about our chapters, so maybe talk about how they can get involved in real life, how they can get involved digitally, how they can support us. What would you like people to know as they consider engagement with Mob United?
Well, first and foremost, today is Giving Tuesday, right? And so,
Yes, it
if
is.
you're watching, you can see on the screen the ways that you can donate to Mob United. You can text to give. You can text Mob U to 44321, or you can visit our donation page on the website. You can even donate on Facebook and Instagram. I do know that we have a couple of fundraisers that are running on both of those platforms as well. You can get involved by visiting our website, www.mobunited.org. You can reach me through the website as well if there's something that you want to propose. We're looking for strategic partnerships. We're looking for chapter leaders. We're looking for volunteers. We do have 17 established chapters around the United States, and that map is on our website. You can join a chapter or start your own. We are really just looking to make sure that as we continue to build out all of these initiatives, that we have the moms on the ground that are going to push those initiatives forward. That is one of the most important things that you can do is really be present. We talk a lot about the national platforms, but a lot of the stuff that really matters are school board elections and local police chief elections and town halls, and all of those things happen if we have boots on the ground actually showing up for those things. Um, Other ways that you can get involved is with, besides donating, is like our stuff. Go to our pages, become a member of our mailing list, share something that we share, comment. All of those things in the digital world really do make a difference. As if we want to be heard, we have to push our reach, and our reach depends on you.
Well said. Well, thank you so much. It's interesting. Like, I've known you for 7 years, but every time you tell your story, I learn something new. So we're going to keep doing these interviews. The new things come up that I didn't even know before. I'm like, really? Like, every time. So keep telling your story. It's powerful. It's purposeful. You're helping people just through your personal narrative and journey. It's so powerful. And I am just so excited to be handing over the reins of Mob United to you. We're going to be here with you. We're not going to abandon you. So when you say you feel like accountability, I respect that and I appreciate it, but you're not in this alone. Just as we have always been a community and a coalition and a unit, we will still continue to be that. It's just that you're the only one doing it full time, and we trust that you're the best person to do that. So just know that we all have your back. I see people from the leadership team in the chat, which I wasn't seeing these comments until now. I probably would have been crying more if I was looking at this. But so thanks to all of you for being on this journey with us, everyone who's been with us over the past 7 years or any subset thereof. We really appreciate your support. And I'm always amazed, because we're in it day to day, but I was like at a dinner last night that was hosted by Black law firm partners at a major law firm. And I introduced myself. They asked to everybody introduce themselves. And among my full-time job and boards I serve on, I mentioned that I'm the founder of MOBB United. And several women in the room were like, and then one of them, as she was leaving, came over to hug me and to say how much she appreciates what we do and how powerful it is. And she kissed me on the cheek. And it was just such an emotional moment. And, I'm just so glad we've been able to be a blessing to so many people. And this is a moment to support us because we now have an opportunity to take that and scale it. Like, we've been working real scrappy up to this point, like as a startup, but we really need to build the infrastructure. Kim is the first step of that, and she's going to lead that. We really need funding because you can't do anything for free. You can only have volunteers for so long. We need the infrastructure to really scale our mission and really have the impact that we know we can have, because our is still relevant. I wish we didn't still need to have these conversations, but we very much do. So thank you, Kim, for answering the call. We love you. We support you. We're here for you. And we look forward to all that's in store with your leadership. So everyone, stay tuned. We'll be promoting the next episode soon, and make sure you check out all of our social media pages. I believe we're on currently
LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook for the podcast, but we also have whatever Twitter's called now, and Instagram.
Oh, okay. Talk about the X. I don't know about that, but yes. And we're going to be uploading this to Spotify. We can't do it live, but it will also be available on Spotify later.
That is correct. So share this, and thank you, and stay tuned. And I'm looking forward to working with you all.
Yes. Thank you. Good night. Happy Giving Tuesday. MOBBunited.org/donate, or text MOBBU. Wait. Okay. You say it.
Text MOBBU to 44321.
Yes. Easy peasy.
Yes. All right. Everyone have a great night.
Thank you.